prices of gas is a black box to
Yeah.
us. Every day we go to a gas station, we see different prices, and we don't know how these prices come about. There is a lot of effort from California government to fix the gas prices and lower it. What's going on with this?
California has our own special blend of fuel that we can only use here. No other state in the nation produces it. Now, what the government's trying to do with this proposal is require the refiners to maintain a minimum reserve of this fuel so that if there are supply disruptions, we can tap into that fuel to then resupply the market so there's not huge supply spikes.
Proponents say that this bill is needed because price spikes are the result of fluctuations in supply that occur at certain times of the year, particularly right now in the fall, when refiners go into periods of what the industry calls planned and unplanned maintenance. The governor's position here is that this is price gouging by the oil companies. Now, on the other side of the coin there, what the industry is saying is that there could be unintended consequences here, that the bill actually could do the exact opposite of what it intends to do.
California consistently has one of the most expensive gas prices in the nation. And now the state government is passing a new law aimed at stabilizing these prices. In today's episode, we'll uncover the mystery behind the numbers you see at the pump. Who are the key players driving these prices? And how will this new law affect fuel costs across California? We'll find out in this episode. I'm Siyamak. Welcome to California Insider. Alessandra, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
We want to talk to you about gas prices in California, and there is a lot of efforts from California government to fix the gas prices and lower it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's coming up recently is they're trying to get refineries to reserve more of gasoline so that we don't have the price fluctuations we have. And can you tell us your thoughts about this? What's going on with this?
Yeah, so if we get really at the root of the issue, what's happening is that California has a very small supply on hand of the fuel that we can use in the state. So California has our own special blend of fuel that we can only use here. No other state in the nation produces it. So either it's getting produced here in California or we're bringing it in via ship from other foreign countries, right? So what happens is because we have such a small supply of fuel in the state, if there's any disruptions to that supply, prices can skyrocket, because if supply shrinks, the demand doesn't change. And so that has a huge impact on pricing. Now, what the government's trying to do with this proposal is require the refiners to maintain a minimum reserve of this fuel so that if there are supply disruptions, we can tap into that fuel to then resupply the market so there's not huge supply spikes.
If price doesn't go up, yeah.
Yes. So the issue with that, though, is it's not really solving the root of the problem, which is we have a small supply. So it will be a short-term solution. And how we've seen minimum reserves work elsewhere is the United States has a strategic petroleum reserve, right? So the government maintains that reserve so that if there are supply disruptions, if there's emergencies, you can tap into that supply. However, the way this is differing is it would require the refiners to maintain that reserve. So if you're requiring the refiners to maintain a minimum reserve, then they now have a regulatory burden to maintain that reserve, right? So instead of putting that fuel out onto the market, they'll hold on to it for their reserve so they can meet that compliance requirement. That could create artificial shortages, which means we'd actually see even less fuel on the market. And that doesn't just impact California. Arizona and Nevada, our neighboring states, they also rely heavily on our fuel supply that's produced here. And so if our California refiners are having to maintain that minimum reserve so they keep that compliance requirement, then that means they either don't put it out on the California market or they don't send it to Nevada or they don't send it to Arizona for their markets either. It also creates concerns because that's an additional operating expense. The maintenance, the increase in the storage infrastructure, the security that all has to go into maintaining that supply, that's an additional operating expense, which means that's going to also get applied to fuel prices in California because those expenses don't just go away.
So the idea is for the refiners to create this storage. Mm-hmm. So they have to have a place to store it, and then they have to have the amount of gasoline that they're storing. And you're saying that that will pull that gasoline that has to go to the market out.
Right.
For a while at least, right?
Right, because if they don't meet that minimum, the current proposal is suggesting that they could get fined up to $1 million per day. So there's no way they're going to not meet that minimum reserve requirement, right? No company is going to get fined $1 million per day. So it's not like the state is incentivizing them to produce more. They're not giving them the features that they need to make more fuel. If anything, the state has been pretty aggressive in ramping down our in-state supply, our in-state production. And so if they're not changing how much they can produce, they're just changing how much they have to store, then that means that supply can't go out onto the market.
We're covering California issues, as you know. If you want us to cover the stories that are impacting your day-to-day life in California, reach out to me at siyamak@californiainsider.com. Now, can you tell us why there's a limited supply of gasoline in California?
Yeah, well, over the last decade, I would say the state has made a very concerted effort to disincentivize production here. Policy after policy, regulation after regulation that has made it harder and more expensive to operate. And so we've seen refiners leave the state. We're down to about 10 refineries in the state. And so if it's not getting produced here, then our only other alternative is to bring it in and import it from foreign nations, because like I said, no other state in our United States of America produces this fuel. So if we're going to continue to pass policy after policy that incentivizes them to leave the state, then we're not going to have supply. It's either we have the very small supply that gets produced here, or we have to import it. Right now, the CEC, the California Energy Commission, is looking at a potential policy to cap the profits that refiners can make on fuel. That's usually not worked out very well for keeping businesses in a state. They'll just say, if I can't make a profit here, then I'll just go to a different state. Right? I'll just leave. And if we don't have a secure supply in state, even though California has the ability to produce this fuel, we have the ability and the resources to do it, they're telling them we don't want you.
Now, you mentioned other states cannot provide us with our fuel. Mm-hmm. Why not?
It's not that they can't, it's that they don't really have a reason to produce our fuel. So California has a special blend of fuel. It's the cleanest in the entire world. And they just don't have that incentive to produce it because it's much harder and more expensive to produce, and no other state requires them to use that fuel. So if their drivers can use an easier, less expensive fuel, they're not going to make a more expensive fuel, right? They're going to make the easier, less expensive fuel and put it out on their market. We have to meet those minimums. We have to meet that special California fuel. And so we'll produce it, but no one else really has an incentive to produce it. There's no real reason to do it. They wouldn't make much money off of it to have to ship it over here.
So only other foreign entities that would make this blend.
Right.
And now you mentioned capping the profits on the refineries, and prices of gas is a black box to us. Every day we go to a gas station, we see different prices, and we don't know how these prices come about. And when the California government talked about price gouging, there could be potential of price gouging at any level because consumers are not really aware of what's happening. Can you tell us more about how this supply chain works?
Yeah, so I think you see such a price fluctuation because we don't have in-state production to the amount that we need it to be. And so when we can't have our in-state supply meeting our demand, we have to bring it in from foreign entities. And so that opens us up to trading on the market. It's known as the spot market. And that allows foreign entities to increase their prices because they know we need that fuel, right? They don't really have an incentive to keep prices cheap. They don't really care if California drivers are paying less for gas. In-state production does care because they're here, they have, their community that they're serving, they're providing for jobs. Most of our folks that we represent at CFCA, at California Fuels and Convenience Alliance, are small business owners, so they care very deeply about the communities that they serve in. However, if they're at the whims of foreign entities importing this fuel, then that leaves us in a really tricky spot because we can't control the prices that they're selling it to us at.
Can you explain to us how does it work? We go to the gas station, we want to get the fuel, and how does it get there? Who owns the gas station? Can you tell us the whole supply chain?
Yeah, so obviously in-state we'll start out with the refinery. They extract and produce and refine the fuel. And then after that...
So they buy oil or they're
producing it themselves.
They're producing it themselves.
Yes.
Sometimes they buy from the foreign entities, right?
Right.
They have to, yeah.
And there's also folks that are not the refiners that can import fuel as well. That just is another layer. But essentially after it is extracted, refined, and produced so that it could be put out onto market, a fuel marketer or a common carrier will pick up and purchase the fuel wholesale. And then they're the ones that are small business, independent businesses that provide it to the rest of everyone that you know in the state. So either gas station owners, our farmers, construction, schools, they all rely on our common carriers and our fuel marketers to get the fuel to them, and they sell it to them wholesale. And so then, if you're getting down to the gas station level.
So they do the transportation as well.
Right. They transport it
so
from
they're the
point A to
middleman
point
from the refineries to the end
to the
user,
gas station, or to the end user. That could be farmers, it could be construction, it could be housing projects. All of those folks who are using the fuel are getting it from our small independent business owners who transport the fuel on their trucks.
And then from there, where it goes to the gas station, and then
right. So then it could go to the gas station. Who in California, of our over 10,000 stations in the state, 95% of them are small business owners. So when you pull up to a gas station, no matter the name that you see
Chevron,
on the cap, no matter what you're seeing on there, you can know that 95% of them are actually small business owners, and actually over 60% of them only own one station. So we're talking small mom and pop businesses who are really community stores. They're there to serve their community. They care very deeply about their employees because they are part of the community. We're not talking about these big corporations who are located elsewhere and have no buy-in to what's happening to the people that they live right next to.
So when we go to, let's say they have the Chevron name or some other name on top of the gas station, what does that represent? Do they get their supply from a company like that, or what's the difference between different brands of gas stations that we see?
That's a great question. So the difference between a branded versus unbranded station is a branded station like a Chevron or a Shell, they have to only buy that type of fuel. So if you pull up to a Chevron station, that means you're only buying Chevron fuel. If you pull up to a Shell station, you're only buying Shell fuel. If you pull up to an unbranded station, there's no name brand on there, they can buy fuel from whichever refinery, it doesn't matter. So that's really the big difference between a branded or an unbranded station. It doesn't mean that it's owned by a big corporation or by big oil. It just means that when you pull up, you know what kind of fuel you're getting.
The quality of the fuel that
Well,
you're
the quality stays the same regardless. We have very high specifications for the kind of fuel we can provide to Californians. And so no matter which station you pull up to, the fuel you can expect the exact same quality. It just means that there's different additives to the fuel. So Chevron has their own additive, Shell has their own additive, and that doesn't. When you pull up to an unbranded station, you're not guaranteed that there's that additive in the fuel, but you can guarantee that it is of the highest caliber fuel in the entire world.
Now, in terms of pricing, how does the prices get decided? Why do we see 4 something today and 5 something tomorrow? Like, who decides that fluctuation?
So it all comes down to expenses, right? All comes down to cost and what you're buying the fuel at. So when fuel gets imported, they're setting a certain price that the crude oil is getting, priced at. You're going to have to account for that in the price of fuel that you're seeing at the pump. You also have to account for all of your other operating expenses. So whether it's labor costs, whether it's utility rates, whether it's your commercial rent, property taxes, insurance costs, all of that gets baked into that end price. And every single gallon of fuel has about $1.30 that goes to taxes, fees, environmental programs. So that has to be a minimum, at least $1.30 for all those taxes, fees, environmental programs. And then you also have to account for all your costs, right? So how much it costs to have your staff, how much it costs to pay your electricity bills per month, how much it costs to run your business and have insurance. All of those things have to go into the end price of fuel. But the crude oil price can fluctuate based off of what's being brought in.
The fluctuation in price we see, is it because of the crude oil price, or is it because of the gas price, the limitation of gas and supply and demand there? Is there 2 layers of fluctuation?
There's multiple layers, right? So it could be the crude oil price. It could be that supply has dropped significantly and everyone is panic buying. And so you're trying to cool off the market by having a higher price. It could be, your station got broken into last night and someone decided to shatter all the windows and destroy the fuel dispensers. And now that's another additional added cost that you have to make up. It's not free to run a business. It would be great if gas could be free, but that's not how things work. And so you have to maintain all of your operating expenses. Our industry cares very deeply about our employees. We provide some of the best paying jobs, and that comes at a cost. We want to take care of our employees. We want to make sure that they're well provided for, and all of that goes into the end price of fuel. So there's multiple layers of things that could be happening to determine that end price.
So each gas station has their own, because they're all independent businesses. You said 95% of them, they're 95% of them are independent businesses, right?
They're small business owners,
small
yes.
businesses. So they have their own discretion what they charge at the pump, right?
Completely their own discretion. So there's no one telling them what price to set it at. There's no memo that goes out that says today we're charging $4 and tomorrow we're charging $5. If anything, our industry is heavily, heavily regulated. We have antitrust laws. If anyone even whispered a price number, they would probably get yelled at a conference or whatever it is, because we take that very seriously. So it comes down to how much do I need to charge to keep the lights on in my station.
So it's not a coordination among these gas stations to raise the price because they think the supply.
No, I mean, think about it. We have over 10,000 stations and 95% of them are small and independently owned. That would be a massive coordination effort, unlike anything we've ever seen. So no, there's no telling them what kind of price they set. Each individual station owner completely determines what price that they want to put out on their sign.
And what about refineries? How do they price? Because there's been some talk about there's this mysterious amount of money that is questionable where it goes. Can you explain to us how do they work?
Well, there's a lot of things that feed into a price, right? So their operating expenses, they also have to take on research and development. A lot of our refiners are leading the march in looking at hydrogen, looking at all these other alternative fuels to make our fuel market less carbon intense. All of that comes at a cost. So there's infrastructure costs, there's research costs, there's the cost to actually operate refining and producing the fuel. All of that can feed into the cost that they have to charge for the fuel. And it's also, as I said earlier, we have very high specifications for the kind of fuel we are producing and providing in the state. And so they have to meet all of those specifications, and so they can't just cut corners. It's a very intense business. They have to make sure all of their safety mechanisms are in place. They're doing all of their needed maintenance. And so there's no cutting corners when it comes to producing our fuel in California.
If you like California Insider and you like to know what's going on in California, make sure to check out Epoch Times. This is a newspaper that started by a group of Chinese Americans because of human rights abuses in China, and now is starting to grow here. Make sure to go to the Epoch Times website and check out the California section, where you can get a lot of fresh perspectives on what's going on in California. Now let's go back to the interview. Now, you guys are in this industry and you have a lot of members that are working in this space. Have you seen some bad players that kind of could manipulate the price? Because there is a place that this price gouging idea has come from, that the legislature is trying to do something about. Have you seen some players that might be doing that?
So what I'll tell you is that over the last few decades, there have been multiple investigations into price gouging for our industry. And none of them have turned up with anything, meaning they've all found that there wasn't price gouging that was happening. So right now, the government already has the tools to go after price gouging. It's already illegal, and they have not been able to find any form of price gouging in our state. Any business owner that you talk to right now, all of their operating expenses are extremely high. It's really hard to do business here. It's much more expensive to do business here. Everything costs more, and so that all feeds into the end price. If you go buy a sandwich today for lunch, the cost of that sandwich today is vastly different than what it was a few years ago, right? Inflation has skyrocketed. And so we've seen this happen across all industries. For our industry, it's really concerning, obviously, because energy prices feed into the price of everything, right? If your gas prices are high, if your diesel prices are high, then that means every single product that is moved on a truck is going to be more expensive, right? And so it is very concerning that our prices are high. It's very concerning that we have such a small supply, because it's putting Californians in a very bad spot. But instead of addressing those issues, instead of addressing the high cost of inflation, addressing the high cost of operating expenses, addressing the fact that we have such a small supply in our state, it's easier to put the blame on people who are just making high profits, right? And so it doesn't really actually do anything to reduce prices. It's just shifting blame away from why all our California businesses are suffering right now.
You guys represent a lot of the players in this space, and have you guys had talks with the legislature, different players in the legislature, and what's the relationship you guys have with them?
Yeah, we definitely try. We want to be a resource. It is our highest priority that we can educate on how the industry actually operates. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of false facts out there about who the industry is. If you pull up to a station, I think most people on the street will assume that if there's a branded station, it's owned by Big Oil. If you pull up to a station, people are going to assume that Big Oil is telling them what price to set. So there's a lot of these misconceptions that we would love to break down. There's just been a hurdle in trying to get that education out there, but we would love to be a resource. Our door is always open. Many of our members would be happy to host people out at their sites, really talk to them about how they operate their business, how it all works, because no one person does it the same. We'll have one fuel marketer member who does it entirely different than the next. We'll have one gas station owner who does it entirely different than the one right next door, and that is because they're all small independent businesses, and so they decide what their day-to-day looks like, right? And so we would love to have more education of our legislators. We would love to invite them out and be a resource to them, because I think it could really change the course that we're on, and we could actually find real solutions to help this problem.
Now, you mentioned there's a lot of misconceptions. Can you tell us what are those?
I think the huge misconception is who the industry is. So everyone assumes that we're big corporations, we're Big Oil. For our part of our industry, we're small mom and pops for the most part. We're independent businesses. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around why gas prices are high. It's just because people are greedy, but it doesn't account for, I would put everything into three main buckets for why our California gas prices are so high. The first bucket is our taxes, fees, and environmental programs make it so that every gallon of gas has at least $1.30. So that sets that price floor, right? Every gallon of gas, you have to have $1.30 that's going to taxes, fees, and environmental programs. The second bucket is that our supply in the state is very, very tight. So if there's any kind of disruptions, we're put in a very sticky situation. It also means that if demand doesn't decrease, then prices are going to be higher. That's just basic economics. And then the third bucket, that's, we're no different than any other California business, is our operating expenses here are much higher. So our rent is higher here, commercial rent is higher, electricity rates for commercial is higher, our labor costs are higher, our property taxes are higher, our insurance premiums are higher, and so all of that has to feed into that end price of fuel. And we also have the most expensive, hardest to make fuel because it's the cleanest fuel in the world, which is something to be very proud of. We're very happy that we have cleaner air today than we did a few years ago. It's something that we should be really happy about. However, that does come at a cost. It is harder and more expensive to make, and so that feeds into that end price of gas.
Where is your industry headed? I was looking at gas stations and I'm thinking, is this a thing of the past? Because the state wants to go all electric. Have you guys given any thought where this space will go?
I think we'll be around for many, many years to come, probably my entire lifetime, if not past that. What is so amazing about working with our members is they're some of the most innovative, creative people you will ever meet. They're here to make sure that the consumer has what they want. So whether that's hydrogen, whether that's traditional fuels like gas or diesel, whether that's EV charging, whether that's liquid biofuels like renewable diesel or biodiesel, they're going to be there. They're going to be the ones that provide it. We have the infrastructure set up across the state, so we are in the best situation to provide that to our market. And they'll just have to change their business models slightly, but they've always been having to change their business models. They've never, been in a spot where they just get to operate without thinking about what tomorrow looks like. And so it'll continue to be down that route. I think we see a huge change, especially when we look at the liquid fuels that are out there for alternative liquid fuels. So there's E85, which means it's ethanol, about 83%. So that's a lower carbon intensive fuel than gasoline. There's a future out there for renewable gasoline, so those can help supply our light duty market. There's also the heavy duty market. We've seen renewable diesel and biodiesel just take off in California. We're actually the biggest consumers of renewable liquid fuels like biodiesel and renewable diesel than anyone else in the nation. Last year, California Air Resources Board actually put out a study that showed that over 50% of our petroleum diesel has been replaced with renewables like renewable diesel and biodiesel. So we're already seeing that shift happen. The reason why you haven't seen a huge disruption is because liquid biofuels like renewable diesel and biodiesel are known as drop-in fuels. So we can use our current infrastructure, so it can get dropped in at a gas station. We can use the current trucks that we're using. We can get put right into those trucks. And there's really no change in the infrastructure needs. It operates just like regular diesel. It's been fantastic. It has a lower carbon profile. Renewable diesel can actually reduce our carbon emissions by up to almost 80%. So we're actually already burning even cleaner fuel than petroleum diesel would be. And so we're already seeing that shift happening. I think the biggest question is, are we going to choose some of these fuels that are the most accessible, reliable, and affordable for our Californians?
Is it affordable, the renewable diesel, and how does it compare to the petroleum one?
It is fairly affordable, so it's pretty comparable to petroleum diesel. There is the low carbon fuel standard program in California that essentially gives subsidies to renewable diesel and biodiesel, and so it helps it stay on par with petroleum diesel. Sometimes it's actually even cheaper than petroleum diesel. It just kind of depends on the time of year. But that's helped to keep it very comparable with petroleum diesel, which has been fantastic because it operates just like petroleum diesel. It's just now a cleaner, lower carbon fuel.
Do you have any other thoughts for our audience?
My number one piece of advice is to just research and why the California market is the way that it is. So research who the industry is, our small business owners. You know, if you're next time you're at a gas station, go in the store, ask, you know, who the business owner is. They would probably love to tell you their story. They're very invested in their communities. On the other side, with fuel marketers and our common carriers, they care very deeply about their communities as well. You know, ask about who they're employing, ask about why they operate the way that they do. I would say definitely spend some time looking into our California fuel grade versus anyone else, because we do have the cleanest fuel in the world, and that is something that we should be celebrating. We are making great strides in cleaning up our environment and making sure that we have the best quality air for everyone, and I think that's something that everyone should be very proud of. But I'd also, you know, tell people to take some time to look into why it costs more to operate here in California, and that applies to more than just our industry. Look at any business that's operating in California; they have additional costs, and so I think what's most important is that we're educated on why things cost so much and why, you know, we have a trade-off, right? It's a fine balance between we want a better and brighter future, and that's going to come at a cost, and so we just need to make sure that the state is investing in that, because if they do invest in that, then it can make it a much easier transition for everyone.
Alessandra Magnasco with California Fuels and Convenience Alliance. It was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Taha, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you.
You own a couple of gas stations. We have been looking at the prices of gas in California. We are among the highest in the nation. And there's talks that there's somehow some extra money that people in the system are making. We want to hear from your perspective. How's it for you guys, the gas station owners?
For us, it's volatile. At any given moment, our margin might be negative a few cents to 40 to 50 cents. Overall, the business has been good, but there's no extra money or extra pool of money that we're holding back. So every working business day, we get an email about 7 p.m. from our distributor, from the person who sells us our gas. It tells us what the gas is for the next 24 hours. And based on that and what we pay for when the gas comes and what the market will allow us, we'll create our price. So essentially, we look at the price we're paying for it, the direction the market's going, and what our competitors are selling it for. And those are the major factors that influence what we end up at the pump.
If you wanted to price at any point, does the competition affect you guys much?
Tomorrow I can wake up and say the price of gas is $10 at my station. So yes, I do have the opportunity to price it whatever I want. However, the fine line I'm looking for is how can I deliver the most value for my customer? And that's comparing what other stations are doing and what I paid for, and determining where I can operate most optimally, where I can sell the most gallons and deliver the most value to my customers. Some big factors that go into what a gas station can charge are as simple as, how is our customer service? How clean is our store? Because consumers care about more than just gas prices. So if I operate good, clean stores, I'm able to charge a few cents more than maybe somebody down the street who doesn't operate a clean store, or maybe the customer service isn't there. I'm sure you've walked into stores where the person doesn't even talk to you.
You mentioned that sometimes you could lose a few cents, sometimes you make a few cents. Can you walk us through how that works?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. A new gas station opened about a mile away from me a couple days ago. And technically, when new stations open, they try to drop the price to bring in new customers. My tactic was to match them. That resulted in me being in a loss of 7 cents a gallon as of yesterday. So that's common when you're competing with new entrants to the market. If the gasoline price swings up rapidly or swings down rapidly, especially when it swings down rapidly and the price of gas in my tank is from the old price, I have to adjust to the market and compete. So that will result in many times losing money.
But over time, these fluctuations, you guys are able to make it because usually changes happen and then you make back when the market goes up, right?
So back to that example, today I got a load of gas. It changed 40 cents. It went down 40 cents. I will deplete my old inventory in the next 24 to 36 hours. And at that time, if the market doesn't adjust down, then there'll be a profit of 30 or 40 cents. And when you combine the two, you average it out to about 15 to 20 cents, which is the industry average. And actually the break-even cost is about 20 cents a gallon.
So that's what usually gas stations make, 20
Between
cents.
20 is the low end. The high end is about 40 to 50 cents. And that's based on regional. In my region, where I'm from in Porterville, the cost of living's affordable. And so 20 to 40 cents is about the norm.
And that's based on the cost you guys spend to operate your gas station with your employees and everything.
That is correct.
Does the price of gas being higher, does it help you guys? Is it more beneficial for gas stations or is it not a big factor?
It's a major factor. When the price of gas was $6 a gallon, we were averaging 5 to 10 cent margin, and consumers were cutting back on their consumption. So our cost to get that gas delivered went up double. Our profit shrunk by 75%, and consumers weren't coming to our stations to fill gas. And when they don't come to our stations, they're not coming inside the store to buy the higher ticket items, the items where we make our living on, the milk, the candy, the goods. So I thrive and we thrive, the gas station industry thrives with lower prices. There's more consumption, the cost of inventory is lower, the profit margin as a percentage, because our profit margin stays pretty much the same. So same 20 cents a gallon or 40 cents. Now, whether that gallon costs us $6 or $2, I'd rather have a $2 gallon of gas than $6 if I'm gonna make the same amount of profit.
Your space has a lot of regulations, right?
Heavily regulated. Heavily regulated. There are, just on the fuel side, there are 2 agencies. There's your agency that regulates everything below the ground. That's usually your county agency. And then there's your agency, a multi-county agency that regulates everything above the ground. So below the ground are our storage tanks and our pipes that feed the dispensers. Those have to be tested semi-annually. They're not cheap tests. They're in the thousands of dollars. And then on top of that, we have the above ground tests for the vapor leaks that are also twice a year, that are also additional thousands of dollars, that are unique just to California only. So there's things that happen only in California.
And is that a factor for you guys to charge more for the gas?
That contributes to the cost of the gas, absolutely. When you have a nozzle apparatus that costs us $1,000 in California and in Arizona it's $150, how could you not factor that in?
And that's to help the environment, right? The way.
That's the idea. Yeah, the intention is to recapture the vapors. When we put gas into a tank, there's empty vapors that have to come back out, so it sucks it back in and it recaptures it. So that's the good thing about what California is doing. However, when is the rest of the country going to catch up?
There's this talk of going all electric and clean fuels. What are your thoughts on that?
Gas stations have been getting an unfortunate bad rap. We're people. I'm a gas station owner, but I'm also a citizen. I breathe the same air as everybody else. I want a clean air, but I want it to be realistic, and I want it to be somewhat fair. You know, somebody like me that spent my whole life in a gas station business to be told that it's obsolete, that's hard to hear without even an option or an opportunity to come to the table. So yes, I'm for a clean environment. And there's so many options out there. There's hydrogen, there's natural gas, there's electricity. Great. As of today, we've been selling a renewable diesel for it's a a diesel that's made from biostock or other ingredients that are renewable. That's something we're doing today. There's a renewable gas in the market that's being produced. It's cost prohibitive right now, but if we were to subsidize it, it's a drop-in fuel. There would be no change in equipment, no new infrastructure, and it'd greatly reduce the emissions that are happening now. There are other options.
What about the electric? How does that impact you if you were all full electric?
As of right now, my understanding is we can't sell electricity. Only the utilities can sell electricity. So when we see these chargers at these gas stations, most time they're not even owned by the gas station. We're renting out the space for them to have it. And when we do own them, we're charging time. We're charging for the time on the charger. And the recent studies I just read the other day was the ROI on a charger is beyond 10 years. It's not feasible.
For you guys to
For us,
operate.
it's not a way to make money as of right now. So if we were to take out our gas pumps and put chargers, we'd be out of business. Under the way things are done now, under the current structure.
And you mentioned you have spent your whole life in this business. Can you tell us more?
Absolutely. I told you I was from Porterville, California, born and raised. My first 5 years of my life, I spent in the back of the store I currently own. My dad built a little shack connected to the store. So every day I'd get up and go to kindergarten. Where my front door ended, the back door of the store began. And so I'd walk to school through the store. I grew up watching my father as he worked in the store and noticing how he cared about people, how he went out of his way to make them matter, feel like they mattered. And he took in his community because this community took him in. He moved to this town of Porterville as an immigrant in 1979, and the community embraced him. And so watching my dad do that and always telling me the customers, number one, people matter, treat them right and they'll treat you right. They'll always come back. I just adopted that as a way of being that went beyond the walls of the store.
You mentioned that gas station is this hub in the community. How?
So we're like this place where you come get your gas, your goodies, your groceries. We become this like central meetup place. And as the community gets to know you and you're watching kids grow up and go to school and you're watching their kids come to your store, it's this relationship you create where it's beyond just a business. It's a place you can count on being open, no matter what, especially during COVID, open. So and then creating that community spirit or that caring for people like my dad taught me how to care and treating people right and people treating you right. You get to know people on the first name basis. Like we know everybody by their first name. We know who they are. We know who their kids are. We know where they're from. We know where they're going. When they come back from their soccer game, we're asking them how they did. It's this relationship that we've created that gas stations create in their communities. That's what makes them the hub. The gas station means a lot more than just a business for me. I grew up there. I grew up in this store. That was how me and my father interacted, was through hard work and ethic and treating people right. And now that I'm a father now and my kids are graduating from college, they would love nothing better than to continue the generation, to continue to go in the line.
Taha Saleh, gas station owner, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you so much for having me.
Travis, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you, Siyamak. Always great to be here.
Travis, you have been covering the Capitol, and there's a special session now. California state legislature and the governor want to pass laws to help lower the cost of gasoline. Can you tell us what's happening there?
Yes, the governor called a special session on the very last day of the normal legislative session. And this was in part because he had tried to move through some measures, a specific bill to do just this, a very similar bill to what we're now discussing in the legislature. And it just didn't happen in time. It wasn't going to get passed by the August 31st midnight deadline. So he called a special session, and this was met with mixed reviews. The assembly agreed to work with the governor and to bring in lawmakers during what would normally be their time of recess to get this done. The Senate leader, Mike McGuire, initially had said that he wasn't interested in this, but later the behind the scenes discussions were conducted, and the senator agreed that if the assembly did initiate these proceedings and pass a bill, he would come back. And that's where we are this week, where the Senate has now heard the bill that the assembly passed. They added some amendments on. So they added some extra protections for the public and the safety of the communities. And then they also set a refinery cap. There's an exemption that's written into this law. And this capped exemptions at, I believe, 75,000 barrels a day. That anyone above that couldn't be exempt from the regulations. And now the Senate has passed it, sent it back to the Assembly. So on a day yet to be determined, likely in the next week or coming weeks, the Assembly will come back to Sacramento. They'll concur in, or they will consider concurring in the Senate amendments, and then this bill would be sent to the governor's desk. Now, the bill itself doesn't actually set any limits in the reserves. As you were mentioning, the oil refiners would be ordered to keep more reserves, but there's no quantification in this bill. What it really does is give the California Energy Commission the authority to create such regulations. So it will allow them to analyze the industry and determine what limits, if any, should be set and how these would be applied. It also gives the commission the authority to impose fines between $100,000 and $1 million per day for noncompliance. And both of these issues are hotly debated in the legislature right now.
What are the proponents of the bill saying?
The proponents say that this bill is needed because, in their opinion, price spikes are the result of fluctuations in supply that occur at certain times of the year, particularly right now in the fall, when refiners go into periods of what the industry calls planned and unplanned maintenance. So there are certain times of the year when they have to do things in the plants, either to prepare for, here in California, we have separate summer and winter blends. So there's things that occur in regards to that. There's also just the regular maintenance of identifying potentially worn parts or other issues in the plant that need to be dealt with. And then there's the unplanned maintenance, when something comes about that no one saw coming, but now the plant needs to shut down, or maybe part of the plant needs to shut down for this maintenance. And this bill would allow the Energy Commission to also regulate and coordinate these maintenance events. So what proponents say is that by making sure that all refiners don't go down at the same time, there should be less fluctuations in the gasoline that's available on the open market. And that's really where they see this as potentially affecting the price. They say if we have enough gas in reserve, then even if refineries have to go down for maintenance or there's changes in the blends, we'll still have enough gas that it shouldn't affect the open market.
The governor has been pushing for this bill. Can you tell us what's the governor's position?
The governor's position here is that this bill is absolutely needed. And he was the driving force both behind the special session and this legislation. And he believes that by limiting or by regulating the supply here, that we can limit price spikes at certain times of the year. And his office is adamant that this is needed, that they call price spikes the same as profit spikes. And they believe that there is some discussions behind the scenes potentially, or that these refineries are using these opportunities when they need to go down for maintenance as a situation where they might be putting out less volume, but they're getting higher prices for what they put out. So he believes that what he says is this is price gouging by the oil companies. And he's vocal about how he's taking on big oil with these regulations and with others that are intended to limit profit margins.
Here's what Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones told us about this special session. Brian, it's great to have you on. Welcome back.
Thank you, Siyamak. Good to be with you.
Brian, you're a lead on the Republican side in California State Senate, and there's a special session going on. Can you tell us what's happening there?
Well, Siyamak, first of all, historically, and ever since I've been elected to the legislature since 2010, when the legislature adjourns on August 31st, we're gone from Sacramento for the rest of the year, doing things in our district, working in our district. Campaign year, this is a campaign year. Those that are running for reelection are, running for reelection. I'm the minority leader, so I'm helping others in the Republican side get reelected and hopefully pick up a seat. That's what we're supposed to be focused on. We're supposed to be in our districts, working with our constituents, meeting with our local chambers of commerce and our local associations and our neighbors and our friends, and doing the picnics and the barbecues, so that we're hearing the input from our constituents on what's happening, so that when we go back to session in January, we have that experience and that knowledge and that reference when we go back to legislate. What's happening this week is the governor has called a sham special session. This is a complete PR stunt on his part. This one bill that we're looking at, ABX 2-1, we could have done in regular session as a regular bill. In fact, there was a bill proposed that does the same exact thing. He couldn't get it through. He couldn't convince his Democrat colleagues in the legislature to hear the bill. So he just waited till the end. And then on the last day of session, regular session, asked for what we call an extraordinary session or special session. The Assembly immediately obliged, and the Senate, I give the pro tem credit for this, he pushed it off and said, the Senate we did our work on this. And I'll say when he says he means the Democrats, because the Republicans were never supportive of this idea in the first place. If the Assembly gets their act together and gets this through, then we'll come back. Well, the Assembly barely passed this bill out on a 44, to 18 vote, 44 to 18 vote. 17 members of the Assembly either weren't there or didn't vote. It takes 41 votes to get out of the Assembly, so it only passed by 3 votes. That should tell you how bad this bill is.
So can you tell us what concerns you have with the bill?
So the main point, I want everybody that watches your show, listens to you, to understand that this is 100% a sham special session. We're not doing anything constructive or that's going to be productive or beneficial for the voters and taxpayers of California. But what this bill specifically does is require the oil refiners to store extra gasoline in their facilities, and they don't have extra storage to do this because the state of California won't let them build extra storage, and this bill doesn't do anything about that either. Requires them to hold back reserves onto their property in their storage tanks, constraining the supply to the retailers, which means there'll be less gasoline available to the retailers, less gasoline for them to sell to the public, which we know will drive up prices, and they could be driven up significantly with this bill. Now, some cynical people would say the governor's doing this on purpose, in addition to all the other regulations he's passed on gasoline and internal combustion engines to drive people out of their cars. That could be a legitimate argument. That hasn't come up in any of the analysis, specifically to this bill, but it is part of a package of bills and regulations that are driving oil refiners out of California and driving up the cost of gasoline for all of us.
Now, is the thought that if you have some reserves, the fluctuation in prices will go away? Is that what the bill is trying to do?
So sure, Siyamak, that's the headline that he's hoping for and wants to get. Now, fortunately, most of the media in California has become very cynical on the governor and his ideas. The reason it won't work is because the oil refiners who make the gasoline in California, which there already aren't enough refiners to make us gasoline, they don't have the storage capacity to do what the governor says he wants to have happen. And that is store up to a 15-day supply. They don't have the storage tanks for that. They don't have the capacity. So all they can do is constrain what they're releasing to the retailers to constrain the supply to drive up the prices. His own CEC, California Energy Commission, which he appoints the commissioners to this commission, have said, his own administration has said, this policy will drive up the cost of gasoline in California.
And if they don't have the storage, you mentioned that most of them don't have the storage, what will happen? Do they have to build it?
Well, they won't be able to build it because they're not allowed to build it. If this bill included a parameter that allowed them to build more storage, it might be a good idea. If we could get more storage built in California, where we did have a week or 2 week supply on hand to level out the spikes, it might work a little bit. But at the current storage capacity, this won't work.
California State Senator Brian Jones, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you, Siyamak.
As you heard from the minority leader, there's some frustrations with some of the lawmakers on this special session. And there's been also some critics from the industry that we have talked to and we are hearing from, and including the governor of Nevada and Arizona. Can you tell us what they're saying?
Yes. And one of the most recent criticisms we've heard is one of the executives from Chevron penned a letter to the legislature on October 8th, expressing concerns that this bill would actually negatively impact supply and that this would, he called it a permanent cost increase at the pumps for Californians. And he expressed concerns as well that this would not only affect California, would also affect Nevada, Arizona. And as you mentioned, those governors wrote a letter, a joint letter to the governor last month, and they were asking that these regulations, the thoughtful consideration be put into any regulations that were impacting the California oil market, because those neighboring states are also affected. And they said that their constituents, as well as the many people we've spoken to here in California, say they can't bear another price increase, that inflation is driven by the cost of fuel and diesel, and that not only will it affect price at the pump, but if we create policies that cause gas prices to go up, that could trickle down and also affect all consumer goods.
How did it impact Nevada and Arizona?
We're in an interesting situation here on the West Coast because it's easier for Nevada and Arizona to get gas from California. And so the nature of the oil market in the United States, the way it works is a lot of the refinery on the West Coast, that's the process is happening here in California. Critics of this bill say that one of the main issues is taxes. That if you look at the national average right now, it's about $3.21 as compared to California's $4.67. And Californians are paying about $1.42 per gallon in state and federal taxes. So there were multiple proposals put forth during the special session to repeal the state's gas excise tax for 1 year to bring immediate relief to the pump. And lawmakers estimated this could have been 35 to 40 cents of a reduction. Now, we asked the governor about this at a separate press conference, and he told us that removing the gas tax was not an option. He said that it would cause too many issues in terms of funding infrastructure needs for roads, and that communities would be negatively impacted if the gas tax was repealed. He also said that there would be no guarantee that if the state did repeal the gas tax, that the oil producers wouldn't just tack on more profits, and so that there might be a slight reduction at the pump, but also an increase in profit margins. The bills that were put forth, there were 5 or 6 bills put forth by Republicans covering different aspects of repealing the gas tax and also removing fuel from the state's cap and trade system, which is a program that fines companies that exceed carbon emission limits. And proponents of the plan to remove the fuels from cap and trade say that this could save 65 to 70 cents per gallon. But there's been no headwinds there. The bill made it to the Oil and Gas Committee hearing on the Assembly side, but Minority Leader James Gallagher, the author of the bill, was not interested in taking some of the amendments. One of the amendments to the bill would have actually killed the idea of removing it from cap and trade. So that bill died in committee. So of all the bills introduced, only one has made it out of both sides, and that's the one we're talking about here, Assembly Bill X21, just to regulate refineries.
Do you have any other thoughts for our audience?
Gas prices are an issue that are affecting Californians across the board, from families and college students to businesses across the state. And this is something that we're following closely. So stay tuned as we keep in touch with the legislature and the industry to determine what the next steps are.
Travis Gillmore, California Capital reporter with Epoch Times. It was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you so much, Siyamak. Always a pleasure to be here.